cultural intelligence, simply put, is the capability to function effectively in any multicultural situation. And the two key words that are really important in that definition are capability, meaning it's a skill. So as someone who works extensively in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, I understand, and I teach organizations all the time, that it's not enough to just make people aware or sensitive to cultural differences. You hear a lot of training around that. So yeah, I'm aware of the differences. I'm sensitive. I appreciate those differences. I value them. And those are all good things, but none of them actually guarantee that I'm going to be effective in those interactions.
Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham, and you're listening to Create Magic at Work. Create Magic at Work is on a mission to equip senior leaders with tools they need to be a true quantum leader and actually understand what that means. Improve employee engagement, retain top talent, and transform your workplace culture to have less drama and stress. So let's start making magic. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Create Magic at Work. I am really excited to kick off season 5 with all of you, and I have a very special guest doing it with me. It's Dr. Sandra Upton, and I want to share a little bit about Dr. Sandra with you. She's the founder and chief DEI strategist with Upton Consulting Group, an innovative team of strategists who work with DEI professionals and organizations around the globe to design and implement proven strategies that create inclusive work environments. They use a research-based change management framework and culturally intelligent strategies. I love cultural intelligence. We had another guest on the show talking about cultural intelligence. So I'm really excited to dive a little bit more into that. Upton Consulting Group supports organizations' efforts to create behaviors and systems that support diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environments. So really exciting. Dr. Upton, welcome to Create Magic at Work. Do you want to add anything to that introduction to share with our listeners?
Very happy to be here and very happy. I love the title of the podcast. So I'm excited to bring a little bit of Black girl magic to the conversation.
Yeah, awesome.
I love it. But I am the founder and, as you mentioned, the chief DEI strategist with Upton Consulting Group. I've been in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for almost 30 years. And that really kind of falls under the organizational behavior development umbrella, but very much have a passion for helping organizations move their DEI work forward, regardless of what stage of the journey that they are on. And improvement and growth is possible. And so I get excited. My big picture tagline is I really just want to make the world a more just place, one organization at a time. So I'm able to do that on a day-to-day basis with the organizations that I partner with.
Amazing. That's incredible. We'll get into that a little bit as well. How about a little bit about your background? So you said you've been doing this for 30 years. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So I've got a long history in academia. Back in my early 20s. Actually, in my early 20s, I was working in education, but then hopped over into the corporate space and worked for a small boutique management consulting firm for about 5 years. And that was really my first introduction to the world of consulting and to working with organizations and just helping them be more effective, whether that was helping individuals to behave more effectively or helping them to think about better systems and structures. And so I did that. And although the firm I was with, we were small in size, we had a very large footprint globally. And so we work with a lot of really fascinating organizations. But again, it was really my first real opportunity as a very young person to really understand the world of consulting and to begin to understand how organizations operate and how they are designed and ways in which we can help them become better. Fast forward from that, I ended up hopping back over into the education space, and I taught as a faculty member in a business school for many years. I taught undergrad courses and courses in an MBA program, and ultimately transitioned into an administrative role as the dean of business for that particular school. And in that role, again, really was committed to making sure that our students were graduating and had the business acumen that was necessary to be effective in the global work environment. And a big part of that was making sure that they had cultural intelligence. So you mentioned earlier, that topic is one that fascinates you. But I had the opportunity as the leader of that division to really set the stage for helping our students not only be able to work effectively in the business world, but do it in a culturally intelligent way, given the diversity that we are seeing, obviously, in our organizations across the country and across the globe. And so, from teaching to serving as an administrator, always had this underlying passion around helping organizations become more effective and ultimately helping them think about how they can be most effective from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. But served for 18 years in education and then still had my own consulting firm during that time. And so I was doing double duty by day as an academician, but then working as a consultant with organizations, again, helping them move the work forward. And then from there, I actually moved on to work for an organization called the Cultural Intelligence Center. So again, when you talk about that topic, I'm very
Mhm.
much familiar with that and played a pretty significant role at that organization around what we call CQ, which is Cultural Intelligence for short.
Mhm.
But I was in my last role in that organization, I was the vice president of global diversity practice. So I was responsible for working with our partners all over the world, helping them to become more culturally intelligent and become more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations. So I did that for 7 years and then decided in the fall of 2021, made the decision to transition out of that organization and relaunch my consulting firm, Upton Consulting Group. So I did that in September of 2021. So it'll be 2 years next month that I will have relaunched my own consulting firm. Same passion, same commitment, new day.
Amazing. So, congratulations on launching
Thank
your
you.
own firm. On the Create Magic at Work podcast, we talk a lot about different intelligences. The
Mm-hmm.
main theme that Create Magic at Work utilizes is spiritual intelligence, which is going beyond EQ, accessing your inner wisdom and compassion. How do I become a wise and compassionate leader? That's SQ
Mm-hmm.
from that framework. So, can you explain to the listeners what cultural intelligence is? And by the
Yeah,
way, before you do, I know in a lot of corporate spaces, they're barely touching on EQ, right?
right,
Emotional intelligence. And so we
right.
have all of these intelligences. Of course, the Create Magic at Work listeners are in the SQ and beyond space. So for those listening that don't like, what's this cultural intelligence? Can you
Yeah.
give them an idea?
Yeah, it's funny, that you mentioned EQ or emotional intelligence. And I always like to describe EQ and CQ as cousins, right? So when we think
Okay.
about emotional intelligence, it's this idea of becoming more self aware
Hmm.
and regulating yourself and also understanding how effective you are in terms of interacting with other people. The one limitation of EQ, so it's important and we all need it, but one of the limitations of EQ is that it's culture bound, meaning it doesn't necessarily take cultural differences into consideration. So as we think about Sandra and Amy connecting now and me attempting to use my emotional intelligence, I'm going to be aware of perhaps what I'm saying, what I'm thinking. I'm going to be sensitive to my interaction with you, but not necessarily thinking about the cultural differences and dynamics that often are at play in our interactions. So cultural intelligence or CQ really picks up where EQ leaves off. So again, I like to call them family because they're all needed. But cultural intelligence, simply put, is the capability to function effectively in any multicultural situation. And the two key words that are really important in that definition are capability, meaning it's a skill. So, as
Hmm.
someone who works extensively in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, I understand and I teach organizations all the time that it's not enough to just make people aware or sensitive to cultural differences. You hear a lot of training around that. So yeah, I'm aware of the differences. I'm sensitive. I appreciate those differences. I value them. And those are all good things, but none of them actually guarantee that I'm going to be effective in those interactions. So that's where cultural intelligence comes in, because it's a capability. It's a form of intelligence that can be measured. And we know that it predicts your ability to work effectively across cultures, and more specifically in any cross-cultural context. So if you think about any, there are so many forms of diversity that we can unpack, but any of those
Mhm.
forms of diversity, we know that as you improve your cultural intelligence, that you are able to work effectively across all of them.
And what is the benefit of that? I
Yeah,
have some
yeah, sure.
thoughts, but I would love to hear. I had a vision of, everyone in a meeting room looking the exact same way,
Mhm,
and or a boardroom. I've sat in them where I definitely looked
mhm,
like different than the other
mhm.
people sitting around the table that were in suits. So what is the benefit of that
Yeah. Well,
for?
there are numerous benefits to having cultural intelligence, and everything from it. It allows you to be a more effective or inclusive leader. It allows you to be a more effective team member. It helps to improve your decision making. Again, all within the context of working across cultures, right?
Yep.
So it improves your decision making, and it helps you become more creative and innovative. So the list, improved judgment. The list is quite long, and again, it's based on solid research. And then
Mhm.
when we think about diversity, it's not just the visible forms of diversity we see, right? So there are the obvious ones when it comes to gender or race, or even age to some extent, generational differences. But there are a whole host of non-visible, right, or invisible forms of diversity that are just as important when we talk about neurodiversity and people with disabilities, perhaps ones that are not obvious to the naked eye. And so when we think about all of those different forms of diversity, so when you use the boardroom as an example, even if everybody looks alike on the outside, each still brings their own story, right? Their own lived experiences. That's diversity as well. And so that person who has cultural intelligence understands that, right? And understands how to develop their knowledge and get an understanding of what those different forms of diversity are represented, and then use that to inform how they can be more effective when engaging with those individuals.
So good. So good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. One of the skills in SQ is your awareness of others' worldviews.
Yep.
And that seems to be, if we were to deep dive into skill building in that, it seems to be cultural intelligence, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I love how you pointed out that even if everybody looks the same, because everyone has a story. And I think that that's so important, because in the workplace, if we have opportunities in certain ways to share our story, then we start seeing the humanity in each other. And then we start having human centered workplaces. And like you said, then we start having innovation. Then we start having quantum leadership. One of the things that I'm often asked on podcasts for spiritual intelligence is, who signs up for this? All right,
Hmm.
what's the pushback you get for
Hmm.
this? And so I'm gonna ask you that same question, because I'm sure
Hmm.
people listening will be like, well, we don't, I've never heard of cultural intelligence, or maybe my
Hmm.
company doesn't have an inclusion program, or they say
Hmm.
there's nothing in the budget. I have
Yeah.
another side question to that, but what is your comment on that?
Yeah, well, for those of us who are not living under a rock, we see that there is a tremendous amount of resistance happening right now
Mhm.
against diversity, equity, and inclusion. Misinformed resistance, oftentimes, but everything from what we see happening in Florida, everything from the recent SCOTUS decision. I mean, all kinds of things that are happening in the broader society that are somewhat reflective of the resistance that we're experiencing. So that is happening, and that is impacting organizations because it's making them nervous and wondering, what do we do? Do we not move forward with this work? Do we just shut down and kind of go back to things the way they used to be? And the answer, of course, is a resounding no. But that is happening in the broader society, and so we need to be aware of that and not allow it to paralyze us to continue to move forward. And then, of course, when you go inside the organization, there's certainly resistance at times and at certain levels. And my experience is that oftentimes that resistance is simply coming out of fear, right? People are fearful, like, what does this mean for me? How is it going to impact me? What kind of changes am I going to have to make? And so my response to that, or as I'm helping organizations navigate through that, the first thing that we really like to emphasize is the fact that when we talk about becoming more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and becoming a more culturally intelligent organization, that's not a zero-sum game, right? It's not that if Sandra wins, Amy loses, or if Amy wins, Sandra loses. It's about, let's work hard to create equitable experiences and opportunities for everybody. And when we do that, everybody benefits from that, right? So if we see some disparities in the organization, for example, where the women in the organization and leadership are not being compensated at the same level as the men, right? That's a problem, and we need to fix that problem. But as we are redesigning systems and policies and practices to close that gap, now we have a system in place that will protect everybody across the organization, right, from experiencing those inequities. So that's one example of, so part of it is educating people and really helping them understand that this is not a zero-sum game. It is a win-win. We all get better. The bottom line is positively impacted, and everybody is going to enjoy their work more, and that then motivates people to work harder, again, frees them up to be creative and innovative. So again, the benefits are extensive, but that's usually a starting point, just kind of minimizing that resistance by addressing the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And but then the reality is that even when you go through all of that, there's still some individuals who may resist, and that's when at some point the organization, the leadership has to make a decision that this is who we are. It's going to be part of our DNA. This is the direction that we're going in. This organization might not be a good fit for you long term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you this
Mm-hmm.
because you're the only person I can ask this to. What is your take on, how do I put this? I want to call it free labor. I have seen, working with clients that are working in the inclusion space,
Mm-hmm.
that they offer a lot of their time and energy for free
Yeah.
without compensation. I have seen some organizations create inclusion programs and have volunteers or leaders that step into this extra work, and they're not compensated for it. I've also seen in coaching burnout coming up in sessions
Mm-hmm.
due to that. However, they feel this is their passion, this is their mission to help, they're well versed in this area. I personally struggle with that. I feel that everyone should be compensated for their expertise and their work. And I often see it happening with women of color, Black women.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that? Because I have a
Yeah.
lot to say about that, and I don't want to, but I'm
Yeah.
just like, I
Well,
want to jump in. Okay, I'll let you answer first because yeah, I really wanted to ask you this.
Have
Okay.
a whole session just on that, right? Very easily. I mean, obviously, my first thought is, you pay for what you value. You pay for what you value, right? So if we start with that, then it becomes, this question around, do you really value diversity? And again, using my work as an example, do you value diversity, equity, and inclusion? If you do, then you're going to demonstrate that by allocating the necessary resources. I always, when I'm working with organizations and helping them to try and move the work forward, there are two questions that I will ask that tell me a lot about whether or not you are serious about the work. And I'll say, okay, so let's say they have a chief diversity officer. I'll ask, what is their reporting structure and what's the budget,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if they are layers down from the CEO, that can be a red flag, right? Because, you're not going to put your VP of marketing way down. I mean, those other C-suite individuals oftentimes will have a straight line to the CEO or the president of the company. If that CDO is way down and they've got several layers between them, and that speaks a little bit about how much you value that role, and how much you understand the importance of them having access to top leadership, right? And then if you combine that with the fact that there's this tiny budget that they have to work with to try and get the work done, that is also a red flag. So I am right there with you in terms of, whether you are working inside of an organization doing this work, that you should have the allocated resources financially and otherwise to support the work. And certainly as an external consultant or whatever, we don't blink when we have to pay attorney fees or, any other kind of vendor that we value their service, an outside accounting firm, whatever that
Mhm.
might be. We understand because we think that's important. And so we put those dollars towards that. And the same should be the case when we are coming in and talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and or cultural intelligence.
So, what would you say to those individuals that are offering their expertise without compensation?
Yeah.
What would you, and
Yeah.
they're feeling burnt out from it?
Yeah, yeah, I would say as a general rule, know your worth and don't settle or compromise that. So that would be the foundational principle that I would encourage them to live by. There are always circumstances or situations by which you feel I do want to give to this organization or this cause because of a passion, or that's just part of the charitable side of the business that I want to offer. But generally speaking, do not devalue your services or allow others to devalue your services. I remember years ago, I talked at the beginning about very early on in my career. I was very young. I was in my early 20s, and I went to work for this consulting firm. It was a small firm, but we were very large in terms of our footprint. And the president of the firm, who happened to be a white male, I always say, when I think back on that experience, he was really my first executive sponsor. But I remember he saw something in me and brought me into the organization. Typically as a consultant, you have years of experience in your field or industry. Then you go
Mhm.
out and consult people because you have something to consult them about. But he saw something in me and kind of brought me in as this consultant in training. And I remember him telling me what my hourly rate was going to be as he was beginning to assign me to clients. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money, for them to pay me. And I don't know if I know what I'm talking about yet. And he said, never ever apologize for your fees. And that again was
Mhm.
way back when I had limited experience. But if we're talking about someone that's where we are today, right? They have years of experience. Absolutely do not devalue your services and what you have to offer. And if you are up against an organization that is not interested or willing to compensate you for your worth, there are others that are willing to do that. And again, it's not that it's just about the money, but it's about your hard work and the value that you bring to that organization to help them move
Yes.
forward.
Yeah. That is just an amazing gift that you had a mentor that early on share
Hmm.
that wisdom.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And sharing it with everyone listening because some of the listeners of Create Magic at Work are entrepreneurs as well,
Hmm.
coaches or teachers, mentors. So beautiful advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. What do you think is next for
Hmm.
inclusion work in the
Hmm.
corporate space? Where do you see it
Yeah.
going?
Yeah, great question. There's some I think some really good conversation that's happening now because of the resistance, and again, in particular, the broader society from the SCOTUS decision to again what's happening in Florida about this idea of reframing the work, reframing how we talk about the work, reframing how we do the work. And I think those are healthy conversations, as long as it's not watering down, what we're trying to do. But it's okay to think about the work differently. I think I think that's, again, healthy, and I think that's wise. I think that we will have to buckle down, right? The resistance that we're experiencing is probably going to heat up more before it dies down. But at the same time, we've been here before. And so I think what's next is really going back and looking at your strategy around the work, making sure that it really is substantive, making sure that you really do have that it's data driven, and that you've got some solid metrics that will help you measure whether or not you're making progress. But in that, have different conversations. I was, as an example, when we talk about reframing the conversation, I used to do some work with MIT, and I was speaking with one of their leaders, and they used to call the work diversity, equity, and inclusion. But given all of the backlash and all of the things that are happening in higher education, they wanted to be proactive, and because you don't know what may happen next, and we don't want to, again, anything to derail the work. And so they've just changed their language a bit. And instead of calling it DEI, they call it B for belonging, A for achievement, and C for composition, right? So
Mm-hmm.
belonging is, they still want every student that comes into the university to feel a sense of belonging. They want every student to achieve, right? And they want to make sure that their composition of students reflect, right, the broader society and the diversity that's represented, right? So different language, same goals,
Mm-hmm.
same intent, right? But it to some extent protects them, right, from what's happening in the broader community in terms of those trying to say that we can't even talk about diversity. So I think, again, the next is really making sure that your strategy is tight, that it's focused, that is data driven and outcome driven, and that you're willing to have conversations around how do we move this work forward. Maybe we need to think about it differently without watering down our primary goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. I have spoken with a few people from the past, some guests on the podcast as well, that have mentioned to me off recording, I'm just going to say it on recording here, that some of the neuroscience behind these words, like
Mm,
diversity, equity, inclusion, actually in your nervous system, and some people will trigger them to shut down
mm,
in some of these scientific studies. So I think you're right on point with, it's just a language, it's just a shift in helping people remove their fear, like you mentioned in the
mm.
beginning, and understanding that it's another skill in SQ, that the experience of oneness, that we are all one. Just like me, this person is just trying to experience joy in life. Just like me, this
Right.
person is trying to avoid suffering. Just like me, this
Mhm.
person has been through some hard, the compassion part, right? And so I think that that really feels what is coming next. I think you hit right on it, is the human centered. And I think if we gathered a room of leaders together and asked them, tell me about a time where you felt excluded at work, the stories would be emotional.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
think it would be transformative. And I
yeah,
think that that creates everyone seeing the humanity within each other. and
yeah,
and what happens with that is then you just start helping each other out with projects, them
yeah,
as another real human being. And then the innovation and the productivity and all of that starts, just the wheel starts turning,
yeah.
because humans are helping humans and not just seeing each other as robots coming to work, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I
So
and I also think that, that doesn't mean, even as we think about reframing the conversation and the work, that doesn't mean that we're going to escape the uncomfortable conversations, right? And the difficult conversations, and honoring the truth and the realities about where there are significant gaps in our organizations when it comes to certain groups and certain underrepresented groups or certain marginalized groups. And so we want to always make sure as we go forward to have the balance between, yeah, we can think about how do we reframe this, and again, the goal is everybody wins. But in that process, in order for everybody to win, some people are a little further ahead in the opportunity game than others. And so how do we reconcile and fix that? And sometimes that requires some difficult decisions, difficult conversations. So that's all still has to be a part of the work. going forward. But I believe it can be done in a way, again, where people, we can still educate people and help them understand that even on the other side of those difficult conversations and decisions and changes, everybody wins. That's the goal. That it's about everybody, like you said, having the joy, having that freedom, having that safety, to be able to function at their best, and be celebrated for who they are and what they bring to the organization.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that that's a great way to sort of move on to our next topic on that note. You just something came up
Mhm.
for me before we go to I'm going to pull a journal prompt card for you.
Sure.
A fellow colleague of mine always shares your candle does not go out by lighting someone else's. Like that just hit me when you were saying it's a
Mm.
win-win. Everybody's going to show up better, they're going to perform better and all those things. So just I just wanted to say that out
Yeah,
loud.
that's
Like
great. I love that.
let's light everyone's candle and ours will still stay lit.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know? All right, so I'm going to pull a journal prompt card from you from the Create Magic at Work journal prompt card deck that I authored.
Mhm.
It's a deck of 33 cards. You can find it on my website, createmagicatwork.net, and it has different themes for the workplace. And we're going to pull a message for you and the listeners today
Okay.
meant for them. So I'm going to pull a card here. I love this so much because every time we do an episode, like I feel like the energy of our conversation just like picks up and the card comes out. And so guess what we got? We got expansion.
Ah, okay.
I got the chills. I got the chills. Um, so the illustration is a door opening and stepping out into this beautiful area with birds flying. The
Mm,
affirmation is I am proud of my unique skills and I use them to open new doors for me. So
I
everyone
love it.
listening, repeat that to yourself. I
Yes.
am proud of my unique skills and I use them to open new doors for me. Dr. Sandra, can you share a piece of advice? What are some ways that people can apply their unique skills in the workplace or attempt to? I think
Mhm.
you're a
Yeah,
good person
yeah.
to offer that.
I think one of the things, that was really powerful and it's got me reflecting and gave me a few chills as well. But I think it's this idea of, really honoring yourself, right? Honoring who you are and what you bring to an organization, to relationships, to different spaces, right? And celebrating the fact that there is room for that. I think about the example that came in my head as you were sharing that affirmation is, I think about the work in the DEI space. There's a lot of people out in the space right now. There's a lot of noise. And
Mhm.
some of it is just that it's noise, but there are a lot of really good people who are, I think, doing some great work in this space. And so but because there's so many people and so much going on, it's easy to feel like, oh my goodness, this is crowded, it's saturated. What do I have to
Mhm.
bring to this space? And when those thoughts may come to me, I'm reminded that I have a unique voice in the space. I have something to share based on the accumulation and combination of my personal lived experiences, my professional experiences, my education, all of those things allow me to bring a unique, special insight to this work that no one else can bring. And I think that is the same for anybody that's listening, whether you are working in the DEI space or spiritual, quotient space or whatever your field or purpose is, recognizing that all of the things that make you who you are very unique and that adds value to the work that you are doing, in that broader community. So never shy away from that, but embrace it, celebrate it, and be bold with it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, how can they reach out to you to connect with you?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I am quite active there talking about all things DEI and cultural intelligence and how to help your organization be more effective. So you can reach me on LinkedIn. You can check out my website, which is www.uptonconsultinggroup.com, or you can reach me directly. My email address is sandra.upton at uptonconsultinggroup.com. That's Sandra.Upton at uptonconsultinggroup.com. So any of those ways, you can feel free to connect with me or just follow me and see what I'm up to when it comes to the work that I do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sending some magic to the Create Magic at Work listeners today. We'll drop all those links in the show notes as well, so people can just click on connecting with you. And yeah, thanks for being a guest on Create Magic at Work. It was an amazing conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Do you have this feeling that you were called to do something very special and important in the world? Do you consciously tune into something higher than yourself for guidance and inspiration? Have you had mystical or spiritual experiences that have provided guidance in your everyday life and work? If you answered yes to those 3 questions, then you are a fit for a Create Magic at Work coaching program. If you're looking to explore new frontiers in your personal and professional life, I invite you to consider stepping into one of my coaching programs. I specialize in helping people step outside of their comfort zone and embrace the unknown. Whether you're looking to launch a new business venture, navigate a major life transition, or simply push yourself to reach new heights, I can help you achieve your goals. Please schedule a complimentary consultation with me at createmagicatwork.net. Click on Work with Amy, and I can't wait to see you. Sending magic to you. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.